guys, welcome back for episode number 126 of the weekly playback. So because we had FlagCon and regular game nights and all of that, I have played so many games in the last 2 weeks and I'm not going to be able to get through all of them today. So I'm just going to name all the games, and if I don't talk about a game today but you really want me to talk about it, then let me know and I'll discuss it in next week's video. So the games I played in the last 2 weeks are Galileo Galilei. I played 2 games of that. I played 2 games of Fairy Ring. I played like 4 games of Rebel Princess. I played another game of Paella Park. I played Windmill Valley, Nakosu Dice, 2 games of Grockton Pond, Fall, Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition, Amun-Re, Sagrada, and Stamp Swap. I think those are all the games I played in the last 2 weeks. Oh, and I did play like half a game of Daitoshi. We didn't finish it, but I might try to mention that a little bit. And then, of course, there are all those games that I talked about after I got back from Spiel Essen, which has now been more than a month, and I still haven't talked about a bunch of games that I played leading up to Spiel Essen and then shortly afterwards, and I think that I'm just going to have to leave them off because at this point I think it's going to be really difficult to remember. But just to mention some games I played that I never talked about, like Night of the Ninja, Kelp, Robot Quest Arena, Night Sky Explorers, which I hope I'll get to talk about at some point in the future, hopefully after playing it again, Intarsia, Phoenix Farm, and River Valley Glassworks. So yeah, so you know, there's a huge black backlog now, and it's just going to be really hard to get to everything. So anyway, with all of that said, let's just get started. Let's talk about Galileo Galilei. This is a 2024 game for 1 to 4 players, designed by Tomas Holek, and the art is done by Michal Peichel, and it's published by Pink Troubadour Games. Now, this is an action drafting, like area majority kind of game, and yeah, so we'll talk about all the different mechanics in this game, but I played this game twice and absolutely loved it, and I played it once at 4 players and once at 3 players. So let me just show you the main board, and then I'll talk about just briefly all the areas, but once I get into the explanation, I'll go into more details. But here is the main board, and I'm going to throw up a picture, but you're going to have like observation cards here that will allow you to make observations of the different kinds of things that will come up. You have your Book of Comets here, and I'll explain what that is. You have a university over here, and in the university, there's going to be different tracks that you can try to go up, and that will also determine what points you might receive at the end of the game, but I'll go into detail about all of that in a little bit. There's going to be objectives that you might be trying to meet, which will be over here. And here is like the Inquisition tracker. So there's like an Inquisition going on as well during this game, and you're going to have your own Inquisitors on your own board. So on your own board, you will have your telescope here, and everyone is going to have a number of these tiles, and they all show the same thing on the different tiles. So I mean, across players, like each tile doesn't show the same thing, but all the players will have the same tiles, but you're going to randomly place them, so it might not be in the same order from player to player. So you're going to randomly place them with the light side up in your telescope, and these are the actions that you're going to be able to take. So you're going to start with your telescope with the pointed at the second X on your telescope. And on your turn, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to move your telescope 1 to 3 spaces, and then you'll take the actions that are indicated where your telescope lands. So there's always going to be these permanent actions over here. So if you see a telescope, that is an observation action. If you see a die with a plus, that allows you to add a die to your board, and you can always hold up to 4 dice, but only a maximum of 3 of one color. If you see a university symbol with an arrow, that allows you to move your university marker up one of the university tracks and gain the benefit. If you see this symbol here, that allows you to upgrade one of your tiles to the advanced side. And then finally, this quadrant allows you to just collect a quadrant, which are some things you'll use. And on these tiles themselves, let me just show you some of the things you might see. So you might see, for example, this is a library book, the purple book, and that means you'll move your library token along a certain library track. So as you're getting more and more observations into your library, you'll be moving your library token along the spines of certain books in one level and gaining the benefits as you go along. So sometimes you'll see a library book that says a 1 on it, so that means you move it 1 space. If it's a flag, you move it to the very end and gain everything that you passed. If you see a die of a certain color, color with an arrow that allows you to increase the pip value of all the dice you have of that color by that many pips. So one arrow would mean you would increase it by 1 pip. Here, for example, is a multicolor die, so you can take any one die and increase it by 2 pips, but just one die. So if you have like 2 blues, you can't do both blues with that. Yeah, so those are the various things that you'll see on here. And then the advanced side has better things. Well, one of the things I didn't show you is this. So this is a little Inquisitor, and that means you're going to move your Inquisitor 1 space over in the cellar, and I'll talk about what that means when we kind of get to that part of the explanation. So you're going to move your telescope 1 to 3 spaces forward and then take the actions. You can take your actions in any order you choose, but you must fully complete one action before you can do another action. So if you landed over here and you had the telescope and underneath it was like the red die, increase pip by 1, so you could decide to increase the pips on your red dice by 1 before you decide to do an observation action. Now, if you're doing an observation action, you can observe either the main thing that's on the observation card, or you can observe constellations. So you're going to prepare the deck according to the number of players, and you're going to start out with level 1 observation cards, and eventually it'll increase to level 3, and it will get harder and harder to observe as they increase. But I just want to show you an example. So I'll show you the Orion, actually that's a level 2. I'll just start with a level 1. So let me just show you Jupiter, because I like Jupiter. So here is a Jupiter card. So if this card was on the main board and you wanted to do an observation action, you would need to combine a certain number of red and yellow dice in order to equal a 7 orange. So you must always have the 2 dice colors that are indicated above the secondary color that you need to mix in order to create the secondary color in order for you to observe this. Then you would gain the points that are listed below it, and sometimes you might gain an Inquisitor if it's worth even more points, and again I'll talk about what that means in a bit. Then you would add this to your library. So then after you've done the observation, you would slot it in over here like that on your library board, and you're just going to keep on stacking up cards so that your library will increase as the game progresses, and you're going to have more and more cards there as you make more and more observations and more benefits for you to get from your moving your library token. So that is what doing a major observation is. So if you do a major observation, you just need to have the primary colors in your dice pool with the pip value totaling that number of the secondary color, and then you remove those dice from your pool and put them back into the supply. So in this case, you could have 2 red dice and 1 yellow die, or 2 yellow die and 1 red die, but you must have the dice that equal that secondary color. If you cannot, well, actually, I'll talk about that in a bit. A secondary observation, a lower observation, might be a constellation observation. In that case, you only need 1 color die, and this is the benefit you would get, and that's when you would place a constellation token here. So on your board, you're going to have a certain number of constellation tokens. So they're star tokens. Sorry, let me just show you the board here. So over here, you're going to have star tokens. You would remove the first one, and when you do a constellation observation, you're going to put your token right on the card, so it'll remain on the card right above this spot to show that someone's already observed it, and then you would gain the benefit that's underneath there. So you have a total of, it looks like 7 constellations that you can observe. So once you're out of constellation tokens, you can no longer observe constellations. And if you do a constellation observation, you can do up to 2 at a time. So you can observe 2 constellations at a time, but if you do a major observation, you can only do 1 major observation at a time. If you do a major observation and someone's constellation token was on that, it just gets discarded from the game. So it just gets removed. But again, you know, you'll put your constellation token here to indicate that you've observed that constellation and no one else can do that. So that is the observation action. Let's talk about the comet action. So like, let's suppose you ended up here and you wanted to observe a comet. That's really simple. All you're going to do is remove one of your comet tokens from your board and place it above the observation cards on the main board. So you're going to have 7 comet tokens here. You'll just remove one and place it above the constellation cards. That's all that is. That's all observing a comet means. So it's very, very simple. But what those comet tokens do is allow you to give you kind of, they help you in making observations. So when you place it above the cards, you're going to place it with the one side up. So now if you cannot meet, for example, the number 7 here in order to observe Jupiter, but you have 6 in dice available, you could use the comet that you have above the cards in order to now meet the number 7 that you need. You can never use a comet if you have dice that will satisfy the observation requirement. You can only use these comets if you are actually lacking the pips necessary to make an observation. So if I had even 8 available in dice and a comet above the board, I could not use the comet in order to preserve one of my dice. If you have leftover pips, you do not gain anything back for the leftover pips. So you would lose any leftover pips, and so you want to try to use these at a time when your pip values are low and you can actually use these. Once you use a comet, you then flip it over to the 2 side and place it below the cards on the main board. So again, first time you place it, you're going to place it as a 1 up here. Once you've used it in order to do an observation, you'll place it below the cards with the 2 side up. And again, now you'll have 2, value of 2 to use to make an observation on a future turn. And then once you've used it the second time, you will be adding it to the Book of Comets. So at the end of your turn, if you manage to use your comet for the second time, meaning you use the 2, then you will add it to the Book of Comets. So at the end of your turn, you'll be able to gain one of these benefits here. So like you might be able to go up on a library track 3 spaces. You might be able to move your Inquisitors or just straight up gain 3 points. So there's a variety of benefits here. If all of these spaces in the Book of Comets are used up, then you would simply add your comet over here, which will just give you 1 point at the end of the game. So that is how these comets work. And you might score points at the end of the game for the comets, depending on which objectives are available on the board and which kinds of scoring tiles there are in the university, which I'll get to in a little bit. So that is one of the things that you can do as an action. When you observe a comet, not a comet, when you do a major observation, you might end up gaining an Inquisitor. So let me just show you what an Inquisitor icon looks like. So here is a level 3 card, and in addition, if you manage to get the 13 you needed by combining blue and red dice and you got your 16 points, you also have to add an Inquisitor to your cellar. When you add an Inquisitor, you're always going to add it to the leftmost space of your player board. But you really want to move these guys up by the end of the game, because for all the Inquisitors you have left over in these sections, in the first 3 sections of the board, you're going to lose points at the end of the game. So you can see how many points you will lose at the end of the game. There are numbers indicated up here. Now those numbers refer to if you are doing an action where you are, what's the word? Is it influencing? I can't remember. Persuade. So you're trying to persuade your Inquisitors. So if you ever see an icon that looks like this, which allows you to do a persuade action, that's going to allow you to move your Inquisitor along in the cellar. So if you had an Inquisitor here, and let's say you had 2 persuade icons that you could do, you could move him 2 spaces, but let's suppose you had 2 Inquisitors here, you could move each of them 1 space. So you would be able to divide it up as you see fit. However, if you do a persuade action during your turn, during cleanup at the end of your turn, you are going to have to adjust your token on the main board according to where your Inquisitors are in your cellar. So if you did a persuade action and you have an Inquisitor here and an Inquisitor here, well, tough luck, because now you're going to need to go back 6 spaces on the main board with your token there. So again, here is like the cellar on the main board, and everyone starts at the 0 space, if I remember correctly. And let's suppose you did a persuade action and you need to go back. Now you're going into the negatives, and that's going to be worth negative points at the end of the game. So throughout the game, you're trying to ramp up your persuasion actions to get enough of them at one time that will put you in the positive and allow you to move your persuasion token on the main board into the positive section. So at the end of the game, you will will gain positive points and not lose points. So that's a really interesting mechanic throughout the game because from what I've observed, everyone starts by going in the negative. Like you are going to take time. It takes time for you to earn enough persuasion actions in one turn because this is a combo-tastic game. So it is possible to get like a couple persuasions in one turn, but it's going to take time before you can do that. So you're probably going to end up losing, you're probably going to end up going back before you finally start to move forward. And that's pretty common in this game. That's what persuasion is. So before I continue with other actions, at the end of your turn, well, actually, before I talk about that, there are a number of free actions you can do. So free actions still cost you quadrants. So you'll be earning quadrants throughout the game, and you can spend quadrants to do these actions here on your turn. So for example, you could spend 1 quadrant in order to change the color of one die into another, or you could increase the pip value of one die by 1. You can spend 2 quadrants in order to gain a new die or go up 2 spaces on your library track. You can spend 3 quadrants in order to get 2 persuasion actions. You can spend 4 quadrants in order to observe a comet. So you can do this at any point during your turn, but again, remember you have to fully complete one action before you can start another action. So every time you move your telescope, you're always going to have basically 2 things to choose from. You're always going to have the big action and then the lower action that you're doing, and you can do that in any order, and then you might be doing a free action by spending quadrants. So you can decide what order you want to do all of your actions in, and then at the end of your turn during cleanup, you are going to remove this tile and stick it at the bottom and push them all up. And again, your telescope will only be able to move 1 to 3 spaces on a turn. So let's suppose you want to move 3 spaces, you would go 1, 2, 3 on your next turn. You ignore the X's. So tiles that you had previously used, actions you had previously used, will not become available again until like 3 other turns have passed and it gets pushed up over here. So tiles again that you use are going to be pushed at the very bottom. And when you when you reach the end and you have to start counting again, you start at the telescope here. You do not start at the X's, though you started the game at the second X. So that's what cleanup is. And again, during cleanup, if you did a persuasion action, you will need to move your Inquisitor on the main board. So what other actions are there available? So the university. So the university is going to have these different tiles at the top of each university track. And there's going to be these things here. So just for an example, so as an example, let's suppose we had a university, one of the universities looked like this, which is very possible. So if you had a university action, you would move your university marker in this particular university. There are 4 universities on the board, and you decide which one you want to move up. So you might focus on 1, you might focus on 2, because these are going to give you points at the end of the game. So it doesn't make sense to focus on all 4 because chances are you're not going to reach the top level of all 4 universities. So you probably want to pick and choose where you're going to gain the most points. So if you have to increase your university marker, you will go up 1 space for each amount that you increase it. As you start going up, you'll gain benefits, or maybe not benefits, because in this case you have to add 2 Inquisitors. But once you reach the top of a university track, that means you're going to score that many points for that thing at the end of the game. So if you reached over here, you would score 1 point for each comet you observed. If you reached over here, you would score 2 points. If you reached over here, you would score 3 points. And if you reached over here, you would score 4 points for each comet you observed at the end of the game. So each university track is a little bit different and will give you a different scoring at the end of the game depending on what's at the top of that university track. So again, there are 4 university tracks. At the top of the board, there's going to be objectives that people will be trying to meet. So 2 are printed on the board and then 2 others will be randomly placed there. So the 2 that are printed on the board are to make 2 comet observations, 2 constellation observations, and 2 major observations. So if you are the first person who has completed 2 of each of those, you will place your prestige marker over here and you will immediately gain 7 points. Anyone else who completes it would put their marker on the lower level and gain 3 points. optionally, once you've completed an objective, you have the option to bid farewell to an Inquisitor. You can bid farewell to an Inquisitor if they are in the last space of your dungeon. You may not want to do that because bidding farewell to an Inquisitor means that you will gain a quadrant, which again are those things you spend in order to take the free actions, and you will gain a die of your choice. The reason you may not want to to bid farewell to an Inquisitor though is because if you do a persuade action, again, you're going to need to look at all of your Inquisitors in your dungeon in the cellars to see how many spaces you move your Inquisitor token on the main board. And by having Inquisitors in the very last spot of your cellar, you will get to move your token up one space for each Inquisitor that is in the last spot. So that can help you to get in the positive. So I personally don't see a benefit to bidding farewell to an Inquisitor after completing an objective because there are other ways to get quadrants and dice. So to me, it seems more worth it to keep your Inquisitor on your board. But if you are really desperate for a die, then maybe, sure, why not? So that is the universities and the objectives that you will have up here. So again, there's going to be 2 printed objectives and then 2 random objectives, and you'll be trying to complete those, and whoever completes those first will get 7 points, other players will get 3. And again, you'll have different universities with different kinds of benefits on them as you go up, which will score you for score you points for a variety of things at the end of the game. So for example, here's one, which shows a library book. So you'll get points depending on how far your library books are in your library or something like that. So there's a whole bunch of different things that you can score for at the end of the game, depending on what's in the university. So I think I've gone over most of the actions. So throughout this game, you're basically going to be, doing various kinds of observations. You're going to be trying to gain different kinds of dice that you need, increase the pip values, and so on. During the game, you can also upgrade one of your tiles. So on the reverse side of these tiles is a better side. There's better actions there. If you have your telescope on the upgrade action, you will pick any one of the tiles in your telescope to upgrade and turn it to the better side. You do not move it to the bottom when you do that. So if you are at the end of your telescope doing the upgrade action and gaining a quadrant, you'll pick any tile to turn to the advanced side and keep it in place. You do not push it to the bottom. So that's what upgrading means. So I think I've gone through all of the actions. So again, there's doing major observations, there's comets, there's constellations. And again, by observing constellations, you'll gain the benefits listed here, as well as the benefits on the card that you will gain from observing that particular constellation. By doing major observations, you're adding to your library, which you definitely want to do so you can move your library token farther and farther to gain more benefits. So it is a very combo-tastic game. Again, you can only have 3 dice of one color, but a total of 4 dice. And again, you're mixing and matching dice colors in order to get the secondary colors for major observations. I think I've gone through all of the different kinds of actions that you might encounter in this game. So let me just go to end of game scoring. So in final scoring, again, you're going to look at the university and see where your tokens are and score for the various things. Then each player gains or loses points based on how many Inquisitor tokens remain on their player board and based on their reputation at the end of the game. So reputation is over here with your Inquisitor token here that you would have moved if you ever did a persuade action. So again, you're going to see where your Inquisitors are in your cellar, and you'll look at the bottom stars to see whether you gain or lose points. So again, here, if you had like 4 Inquisitors in the last spot, you would gain 4 points because each one there is worth 1 point. However, these can cost you major negative points. So if you had one in the very first spot in your cellar, that's minus 8 points. Then you're also going to look over here to see whether you gain or lose points. So if you ever did gain an Inquisitor, you definitely want to get into the positive because otherwise you can end up losing quite a bit of points in the cellar to a maximum of 10 points. And also, if you needed to move an Inquisitor farther than you could go, you would have lost points during the game, during cleanup. So if you did a persuade action and you were forced to go back on the main board with your reputation marker, your Inquisitor token there, but you couldn't go farther back, you would have lost points. So that happens as well. So you're going to look at that for your points as well. And then, yeah, I believe that's it. So you would have scored points for your observations throughout the game as you were making them. So at the end of the game, you're basically just looking at the university and the Inquisition, and then whoever has the most points will win. Yeah, so that is it. And it says ties. If two players have an equal number of victory points, the player with the highest remaining sum of their observation dice wins. So yeah, really great game. So I really enjoy this game. Everyone who I played it with really enjoyed it and was like they want to purchase this game because it is a lot of fun and it is quite combo-tastic and it's really actually easy to learn. It's one of those games where you can do quite a bit of comboing, but it's super easy to learn, and it's just really fun to plan out your actions and try to get the most out of your turns. And it's just a very pleasant game to look at as well. So it's like a really fun Euro game that's not overly complicated for the sake of being overly complicated. So this was definitely a good Spiel Essen purchase. I believe this was the second game I purchased at Spiel Essen. The first game I purchased was Tea Garden by the same designer, which I haven't played yet, but really fantastic game. So if you're looking for a really good space-themed game that will, would be good for people who are just kind of getting into the hobby. So it's not entirely simple. It might take a little bit of time for someone who is not used to board gaming to really get a grasp on comboing and how they can get the most out of their actions. But it's also a really great game for seasoned gamers. Like, it is very enjoyable. So yeah, so highly recommend this game. And towards the end of the game, it's super enjoyable. Like when you realize that the end game is coming. So the end game triggers when the stack of observation cards runs out. And at the end of the game, you're trying to get as many points as you can. So you're just really racking your brain to figure out what you can do, which actions you should take in order to maybe observe some constellations if there are any constellations to observe. At the end of the game, it gets really competitive, because there's going to be just a limited number of cards left on the board. There's no more cards to put out on the board. And if you're the last player in turn order for the end of the game, you're just kind of like, okay, you're hoping and praying something is left for you to gain points from. So I absolutely love how intense it is at the end of the game as well. So really fun game. I honestly cannot praise this game enough. Like, I honestly cannot even think of a negative thing to say about this game. And again, I purchased this myself. This is not a review copy. So yeah, so if that sounds like something you're interested in, then definitely check out Galileo Galilei. So yeah, so let's move on. Let's talk about Fairy Ring. So Fairy Ring is a 2024 game for 2 to 4 players. So this is designed by Laurence Grenier and Fabien Tanguy, and the art is done by Maud Chalmel, and it's published by Repos Production. So this is so it's got like a closed drafting kind of going on and a modular board. It's an interesting game. I played it twice. I really enjoy it. So every person is going to have like a home. Oh, it's kind of a mess over here. Let me find. So each person is going to have like this on in front of them, and above here you're going to be creating your garden. So you're going to have mushrooms, and each person starts out with 1 mushroom, and you're going to be adding more and more as the game progresses. Underneath here you're going to place which action card or which card you chose for that round for your turn, and over here you're going to place cards upside down. So if you're the first player, you will have this, and this gets passed from player to player as the game progresses. This game takes place over 2 rounds, and you're going to have a certain number of turns per round. So there are level 1 cards and level 2 cards. So in level 1, you're going to be dealt 7 cards randomly. I believe it's 7, if I remember correctly. And then you are going to play 6 of them. So you're going to choose from your hand that you have of 7 cards, decide which of those 7 cards you want to play. You're going to put that face down underneath your garden, and then the other cards upside down, which will then be passed to the next player after everyone has taken their turn. So you're going to be adding different mushrooms in your garden. So when you add a mushroom, so everyone starts with a starting mushroom. Let me see if I can find a starting mushroom card, because that is important. Where are you? So here, why are these all upside down? Where? Okay, here are some starting mushroom cards, for example. So you'll start with a random mushroom above your board in your garden, and when you place a new mushroom after you reveal your card when it's your turn. You will place it to the left or the right of the mushroom or on top of the existing mushroom if it's of the same type. So let's suppose I had the Magidrome and I chose a Magidrome to add to this. I would simply place it on top. So you would place it on top. You can see a dotted line on each card. So you will grow your mushroom, and each mushroom can grow up to 4 cards tall. That is the maximum. So if I already had a Magidrome that was 4 cards tall and then I picked another Magidrome, I would have to place it elsewhere in my garden. Likewise, you don't have to grow a mushroom. Like, let's suppose I picked this card and I already had my starting Magidrome. I could just choose to put it over here. I don't have to grow a mushroom if I don't want to. When you place a card into your garden, you cannot separate cards that are already next to each other. So I can't then put apart these cards in order to stick a new card in. You will always have to go to the far end of your garden in order to place a card. And that's important. And I'll get to why it's important in a little bit. So when you place a card into your garden, that is going to tell you how many spaces you are moving your fairy. So on top of each card, you're going to see a certain number there, and that tells you how many spaces you can move your fairy. So each person has a fairy that's going to be moving, hopping from mushroom to mushroom, not only in your own garden, but everyone's garden. So you're going around this ring that is created by all of the players. So you might end up in someone's garden when you move your fairy. So you'll start on your own starting mushroom and then move however many spaces you're supposed to, and it might be a while before you get back to your own garden. So part of the fun of this game is counting out where you're going to end up, because where you're going to end up will dictate how many mana you get. And you can't always predict where you're going to end up because someone might mess up the count when they place their mushroom. So if you are last in turn order for that particular turn, you can't accurately predict where your fairy is going to end up because people are going to be placing their mushrooms before you get to place yours. You can try to guess, and sometimes your guess might be right, but sometimes it might be wrong. So after you land somewhere, that's when you determine how many mana you get. So there are these mana tokens, and you'll be collecting these throughout the game. So different mushrooms have different ways in which you collect mana, as your player aid will show you. So if you land on a Magidrome, you will gather the indicated number of mana. So a Magidrome will simply just show you how many mana you get. And again, if you landed on a Magidrome, you will get to collect all the mana indicated there. So if I had this Magidrome that was 2 mushrooms tall and I landed on it, I would get 3 plus 4. So that is 7 mana. Now, I would get that if I landed in my own garden. I will talk about what happens when you land in someone else's garden. So for now, I'm just talking about your own garden. If you land on a lookout mushroom, that depends on how many mushrooms you have of that type. So a lookout, you want multiples of these in order to collect more and more mana. So if you have several lookout mushrooms in your garden, you will collect more. Sorry, it's dependent on the number of stacked cards. So it's on the size of the stacked cards of your lookout. So you want the taller lookout in order to get the taller your lookout is, the more mana you will get for your lookout mushroom. Such a weird name, lookout. Then there's a pollinarium. So a pollinarium, you will gather 1 mana per mushroom in your village. And a stacked mushroom counts as 1 mushroom. So if you have 4 cards in 1 mushroom stack, that's still 1 mushroom. So if you land on a pollinarium, you will just simply look at how many mushrooms you have in your garden and collect that many mana. If you land on a luminarium, you will see how many fireflies you have visible in your garden, and that's how many mana you will collect. And then finally, the spring mushroom is a little bit different. If you or someone else, a fairy, jumped over your spring, you will get to collect the mana indicated on your spring mushroom. They have to have jumped over it. If they land on it, you do not get any mana, and that includes your own fairy. So this only counts for you in front of, in your garden. You don't get mana if your fairy jumps over a spring in someone else's garden. So the spring will only give mana to the person whose garden it is in. So that's how the spring mushroom works. Now, if you land in someone else's garden, what you do is you will check and see if you have that same mushroom type in your garden. If you do, you will pick one of the same mushroom types in your garden and collect mana according to that. And the person whose garden you landed in will collect mana according to the mushroom that you landed on. So you will end up benefiting other players if you land on a mushroom in their garden. So as the game is progressing more and more, you are trying to avoid landing on certain mushrooms in other people's gardens, which will give them a lot of mana. Anytime you get 20 mana, you turn it in for a point, which you indicate on your secret score tracker here. So these are kept secret, and anytime you get 20 mana, you're going to get a point. So it's a low scoring game generally. I mean, unless you're, really good, you might get 7 or 8 points, I feel like. But generally, I think it's kind of a low scoring game. Because you're turning in those mana for points, and these are kept secret until the end. So that is the gist of the game. So you are going to decide which card you want to play, and when it's your turn, you will reveal that card and add it to your garden and move your fairy and collect mana. And everyone is going to be doing this, and you're just going to start counting cards, trying to predict where your fairy might land and how many mana that will get you and how many mana that might get someone else. So it's a pick and pass game. So everyone will have a hand of 7 cards. You're going to pick one for you to play that turn, and then you're going to pass your hand to the next player, and the first player will alternate from turn to turn. So that's going to get passed around with the cards as well. And this is played over 2 rounds, and you're going to place 6 cards in each round, and then at the end of the game, whoever has the most points will win. If there is a tie, then I believe it's whoever has the most mana left over, aside from that. So yeah, super fun game with really nice components. Like, I really like these fairies, these acrylic fairies. They're really nice. Yeah, just really, really pretty. So just a really nice, fun little game. Definitely more fun with more players. So I played this once at a 2-player count, which was fine. But with a 2-player count, you can more accurately predict where you might land, because you're only, there's only one other person who's going to end up putting down a card. So you can try to guess better where they might end up putting their card. So it is easier to kind of predict where your fairy might land, and thus not as fun. So I think part of the fun of this game is being unable to accurately predict where your fairy is going to land, and more players creating a bigger and bigger fairy ring that your fairy has to go around. There is a more advanced version of this game where you can play with objectives, but I haven't done that yet, so I don't know how those objective cards work yet, because each time I played this game, I played with new players. So I wanted to keep it simple both times that I played it. So anyway, so that is how this game works. So again, just a really nice little pleasant, easy game. Very easy, but I would say a fun game. And it's a quick game. So if you're looking for something that's kind of quick, that can be like kind of a filler, but not as quick as a typical filler, then I would recommend Fairy Ring for that purpose. And this is not a review copy. This is a copy that I purchased myself. So that is Fairy Ring. So let's move on. Let's talk about Fall. This is a 2024 game for 2 players, designed by Gianpaolo Rosino, and the art is done by Mirko Properzi, and it's published by Little Rocket Games. I purchased this at Spiel Essen because I like a couple of the publisher's other games, which are Hen and Coney. So this is a Cascadia-like game. You're going to have a starting tile, which looks like this, and you're going to be adding tiles to this environment and adding different kinds of animal tokens and trying to grow your mushrooms. So there's different kinds of animal tokens in this game. There are robins, there's, so let me just show you. So there's like a robin token, there's going to be a hoopoe bird, there's going to be a fox and a frog. And then finally, there are mushroom tokens, which you definitely want because those will score you the most points at the end of the game, I believe. So the bag is filled with the tokens, and you're going to randomly draw out 4 tokens and place them beneath the 4 tiles, which were randomly drawn. So you're always going to have a set to choose from. So on your turn, if you're the first player, you will choose first. You will choose the set of the tile and the token directly beneath it, and then you will place the tile and the token. You don't necessarily have to place the token. It depends on which token it is, but the tile you must place. So everyone is going to start the game with these mushroom tokens. So I believe they have 8 in each color. So you'll see these mushroom tokens, and the X is just used to determine which day of the month you're on. So this game takes place over 12 days, and on the first, it shows you what thing you cannot place on that particular day. So if you're in day 1, if you're using this side of the board, you cannot place a mushroom. On day 2, you cannot place a robin token, and so on. The other side of the board is a little bit different, just so you have a little bit of variety. And you'll have been given objective cards for you to meet. So each person is going to be given a flower objective card of some kind, a fox objective card of some kind, and a bird objective card of some kind. So each person's objectives are a little bit different. So one person might want to have more hoopoe birds than robins because that will score them more points. So in this case, you definitely want more hoopoe birds than robins because that's going to earn you more points. And for each hoopoe bird, you will get 2 points. And for each robin, you would get 1 point. I believe I actually had this card when I played the game. You're going to be forming flowers when you connect tiles together. And each person will score a different amount of points for the flowers that they form. And those are really hard. Like flowers will not get you a lot of points. And then foxes will score differently. Like you might have a card which tells you how many you get for each separate group of fox, or you might get a card that tells you that you just want to create one large group of foxes. So, you know, it depends on which card you have, and that's how you're trying to place your tiles and animal tokens according to the card that you have specifically. So when you get a tile and you place it, you of course have to match sides with matching sides unless you increase a level. So you can increase levels. So suppose I had this out, I could add on top of this as long as the tile I'm adding on top has one of the types, the fauna types that is on the tile below, like one of the leaf types, and this does. So this has both yellow and green, and this has both yellow and green. So I could put this on top of that in any way I want, even if it now forms mismatched sides. So you can do that. So you can create multiple levels, and you want to do that. You want to try to create levels of 3 because that will earn you more points if you manage to get a mushroom on it. So you'll place your tile, and then you might place your animal token. So, and again, you might end up forming flowers, and again, those are a little bit harder to place. If you have a toad token, those have to be placed immediately on top of any empty tile because no tile actually has a toad symbol on it. So you will place a toad wherever you can. They can never be put aside. And you can have, I believe, a certain number of tokens, but you can never have more than 2 tokens at a time at the end of your turn, I believe. So you can wait to place tokens if you want to, but then you would have to discard down to 2 at the end of your turn. Other animal tokens basically are placed when you want to place them. So for example, a hoopoe bird or a robin, you can place if you see it available, and same with a fox. But again, you don't have to if you don't want to. If you remove, you can remove some types of tokens. So you can remove foxes and either bird type, but you cannot remove frogs in order to build up levels. So if you're building up to a 2nd or 3rd level, you cannot remove a frog, but you could remove a fox or a bird in order to add to another level. You want to try to place your mushrooms as high as you can, because at the end of the game, you're going to score for your mushrooms. So if you placed a mushroom tile, then you could place your mushroom marker on top of it. And once there's a mushroom, a player's mushroom marker on top of a mushroom tile, that cannot be removed. And the higher your mushroom, the more points you will get at the end of the game. So you're just continuing in this fashion as the game progresses. So again, you might be able to remove certain tokens, but you cannot remove tiles. You might be able to create mismatched sides by adding increased levels of tiles. But once a tile is placed, generally you cannot like change its orientation or something like that. So here you'll see an example of a completed flower, and you can complete a flower with different levels, but again, it is kind of harder to do to complete flowers. Uncompleted flowers do not gain you any points at the end of the game. So the game ends once all 12 weeks have ended. Oh, I guess they're weeks, not days. So on each day or week, you're going to take 2 sets. If you're the first player, you'll take the first, you'll be the first to select. Then the second player will get to select 2 in a row because they're the second player. So it's a snake, you know, drafting, and then the first player will again get to select. So there's always going to be 4 sets available for you to choose from. And you know, it's kind of you know, there's a bit of luck involved in what comes up. So for me, in my game that I played, I just kept on getting lucky that the mushroom tokens would come out when it was my turn. And so my opponent didn't get to place as many mushrooms. So again, at the end of the game, you're then going to score for your personal objective cards, and then for your mushrooms, you will score. So let me just tell you what you would get for mushrooms. Let's see. Mushroom token. So let's see, at the end of the game, each mushroom token gives victory points to the player who placed the markers on them based on the layer they are on. So 1 victory point for first layer, 3 victory points on the second layer, and 6 victory points on the third layer. So you want to try to place mushrooms as high up as you can in order to get the most points. But again, not everyone is going to get to place all of their mushrooms. It really depends on what's available. There are more tokens in this bag than you will use in the game, and same with tiles. There are more tiles in this game than you will actually end up using. And so based on that, it's not, you know, there's a chance that you may get 2 mushrooms while your opponent might get 4. So, you know, there's a bit of luck involved with that. So you're trying to like maybe screw over your opponent when you're trying, you know, you can kind of guess what they have based on what they might be removing or what kinds of clusters of animals they might be making and so on. So like for foxes, my opponent might have figured out that I had the one that would give me the most points for the largest area of foxes because I kept on trying to keep all the foxes together and so on. So you can try to figure things out based on what your opponent is doing as well. So if you're not able to score as many points yourself, you might be able to take away points from your opponent. So there is that. So there is a little bit of take that in which, you know, when you remove tokens and so on. But yeah, but anyway, that's fall. So it's a quick little 2-player Cascadia-like game, but it's nice. I liked it. So yeah, so that is fall. So let's move on. So I know I only talked about 3 games, but I am running out of time because I have to be somewhere in 20 minutes and I have very little time to get through everything else. And I forgot to mention one other game that I played recently that I would like to talk about in the next video, which is Newer Riders. So there's going to be a lot of games to still go through in next week's video. So just very quickly, the games that I am backing, I'm currently still backing Shallow Sea and Sweetlands at their like no reward level so that I can get like production copies of those games for covering them. So yeah, but everything else, the campaigns ended and Thompson did end up funding, which I'm happy about, which was that Christmas game. So that makes me happy. So anyway, new arrivals. I did receive 2 new games and one of them was totally unexpected. So this one showed up unexpectedly, which is Naya Kuza from Simon Games. So this is a Rainer Knizia game that has been rethemed, where you're cat gangs trying to set up fish stalls. So I would like to get this played soon. So that's for 2 to 4 players. And I received Battalion War of the Ancients from Osprey Games, which I also believe is for 2 to 4 players, and you can play like different historical factions engaging in battles. So yeah, so that I would like to try out soon. So this is also a review copy. So these are 2 review copies which I received recently, and I don't think I've received anything else recently. So let's just quickly do other stuff. So book club. So we finished What Moves the Dead, and yeah, it's just a very interesting story about this like mushroom that's taken over dead people or dead animals. And yeah, it was just kind of, it did end up going where I expected it in the end. Like as we read more and more of this book, it became obvious that the mushrooms are animating the dead people, and they're even speaking for the dead people. So that was a little bit of a surprise that I did not expect, that the things that this woman was saying were not actually her words, that the mushrooms, the fungi or fungi, I don't know, is it fungi or fungi? But they were actually learning language, like they were learning how to speak and using the human's body in order to speak. So you can only hope that they managed to destroy that mushroom in the end, and that no one else will get infected, because yeah, that's kind of creepy. so yeah, just a creepy read. It was not like a scary read, but it was creepy. And so yeah, it was a good read. I enjoyed the writing style and everything, and in the end it was enjoyable. I'm not sure I'd read it again. It was just fine, but I did like their style, the writing style and everything else of it. So let me know what you thought of this in the end and whether it was what you expected. And as you said in a comment below before, Sandra, it reminded you of that one video game which I have not played, but I've watched the television series The Last of Us, and yeah, it definitely reminds me of that a lot. And I'm wondering which came first, whether the video game came first or this book came first, because very, you know, definitely reminds me of The Last of Us with these like mushroom zombie like creatures. So let me know what you would like to read next. I have 2 suggestions, but if you have any suggestions, please let me know. So these are just 2 books that I own that I haven't read yet. One is called The Bird King, and that is by G. Willow Wilson, which seems really interesting. And the other one is called The Second Sight of Zachary Cloudsley, and that is by Sean Lusk. So these are just two books that I happen to own, and I just grabbed two random books from my shelf to see if you might be interested in one of these, but if not, that's fine too. Just let me know what you would like to read next. Just leave some comments in the below with your suggestions, and we can pick a book and figure out what we want to read next. But definitely let me know what you thought about this. I wonder if the second book is like a continuation to this, because I know she came out with another book after this, and I'm wondering if it continues with the mushroom story or if it's a completely entirely different story. So I need to find out, because if it is a continuation, then I might be interested to find out whether or not the mushrooms actually ended up taking over and, you know, kind of like zombies, and whether it's a mushroom apocalypse. I'd be interested in knowing that. So yeah, so that is Fiction Book Club. So let's move on. So for our nonfiction book club, we were reading The 10 Myths About Israel by Ilan Papp, who is a Jewish and Israeli scholar and who is anti-Zionist, and each chapter is about a myth which he then tries to break down. So we were supposed to read chapters 2, 3, and 4. I unfortunately only read chapters 2 and 3, so I did not get to chapter 4. So for next week, I'll try to talk about chapter 4, but I'm actually not going to go into too much detail right now either, because I'm very limited on time today. But chapter 2 was called The Jews Were a People Without Land, and it explored the whole history of Christians wanting to get Jews into Israel because they believe it'll bring about the coming of the Messiah. So that's why even today we see a lot of evangelical Christians who are very staunchly Zionist, and because they want to bring about the coming of the Messiah, and they believe by getting all the Jews in Israel that will accomplish their goals. And the Zionists in history have used this to their own ends. Like, they've literally, you know, it's not like they're upset about it. I don't think that they would be upset that the fact that Christians want or support Zionism, even if they think it's going to you know, because the Jewish people, the Zionists, don't believe in what the Christians believe. Like, they have a different set of beliefs. But if one group of people will support their Zionist ideology, and even if it's for reasons that they don't believe in, they're going to accept it, and they're going to take that and use it. And we see a lot of that happen in this chapter. Where you see how this concept developed for these Christian reasons, and then the Zionists were able to use it for their own benefit. And saying that the Jews did not have a land is a myth, you know, so he explores how even Jewish people in different areas were kind of a lot of people were against this idea of Zionism, and they were advocating for Jews to assimilate more or become more a part of their own societies. Or on the flip side, we saw that there were ultra-Orthodox people who, you know, very much, instead of assimilating, kept to their very Orthodox Jewish roots wherever they were located. So those were the kind of two different kinds of things that you would see in different parts of the world, rather than moving to Israel and supporting this Christian belief that once all the Jews are there, then the Messiah will come. So I think that that's what this chapter was mostly about. So, you know, there's quite a few quotes that I highlighted, but I'll just read a couple, I guess. So, you know, on page 12, the author says, Zionism, as we can see, was therefore a Christian project of colonization before it became a Jewish state, because he explained why, how it was a Christian project, in fact. And, you know, he talked a lot about the British and what the British interests were, which we already, you know, explored a lot of in the 100 Years' War on Palestine. So yeah, he talks about how the British establishment enthusiasm for the idea of restoration of the Jews should properly be described as proto-Zionism, like, you know, the earliest parts, the earliest stages of Zionism. So yeah, it says it had all the ingredients that would turn these ideas into the future justification for erasing and denying the basic rights of the indigenous Palestinian population. So, you know, all these things that the British were doing had all the ingredients that were, you know, getting ready to deny the Palestinians their basic rights. Yeah, so it talks about this one guy, James Finn, who was he was the most well-known of the early consuls, and he was described as being very anti-Islam. So it says he detested Islam as a whole, and he never learned to speak Arabic. So here's this person who's like living in Palestine who wouldn't even bother to learn the language of the local population. Yeah, anyway. So a lot of this chapter was about that. One quote on page 19. So again, talking about the colonization of Palestine from, and how both Christians and Jews wanted it. It says the coincidence of the two impulses produced a powerful alliance that turned the anti-Semitic and millenarian idea of transferring the Jews from Europe to Palestine into a real project of settlement at the expense of the native population of Palestine. So he basically talks about how, the Jewish idea of Zionism and the Christian idea of Zionism converge to produce what we see today, basically. Yeah. So that's what a lot of this chapter, I think, was about. But, it does away with the myth that the Jewish people did not have a land. But of course, they're going to say that they didn't have a land because that helps to justify going in and colonizing a location. Oh yeah, he says, he starts talking about the claims of 19th century Zionism. And he says, what matters is not whether the present Jews in Israel are the authentic descendants of those who lived in the Roman era, but rather the state of Israel's insistence that it represents all the Jews in the world and that everything it does is for their sake and on their behalf. Yeah. And then, he in this chapter, he ends up by, he goes on to say that Jews and the world at large did not seem to be convinced that the Jews were a people without a land. But anyway, that one quote about, that what should matter is not whether they are the authentic descendants of those who live there, but Israel does claim to represent all of the Jews in the world and that everything it does is for their sake and their behalf. However, anti-Zionist Jews will tell you today that Israel is what is making them unsafe. Like, if they feel unsafe, it's because of Israel, not because of anyone else in their countries. Like, the Holocaust happened. Yes, that was a terrible thing. But since then, there is no threat of a Holocaust happening again to the Jews. And if anyone is making them feel safe, it's the very Zionist government of Israel that commits these atrocious acts and then claims that anyone speaking up against Israel is anti-Semitic. It's basically the boy who cried wolf, and that's what's going to actually make Jews around the world unsafe. If you consistently claim everything is anti-Semitic, then when there actually is anti-Semitism, then that's going to be a problem. Then that's going to get ignored because people will at that point be sick of hearing the words anti-Semitism if you call things which are not anti-Semitic, anti-Semitic. Anyway, so moving on to chapter 3, Zionism is Judaism. Yeah, so, I'm trying to remember what this chapter was about, but basically, I think this is a chapter where it talked about Reform Judaism and ultra-Orthodox Judaism and why these different groups were both against Zionism as it began, and how over time, they started to accept Zionism more and more, while there are still secular groups that are anti-Zionist, and there are still Orthodox groups who are anti-Zionist, and we see them marching along Palestinians at anti-genocide protests. But over time, more and more of them did end up accepting the biblical rationale of Zionism and how Israel and Palestine belongs to the Jewish people because of the Bible. So I thought that this was a very interesting chapter where it talked a lot about the Bible and how the Bible came to be used by even secular Jews in order to justify their claims on Palestine. So just a lot of interesting stuff in this chapter, including how they wanted Gandhi to support Zionism, and Gandhi himself was against Zionism because he did not approve of religion being used to colonize a land and deprive people who live there of their rights. So that I think it's just kind of funny that they were trying so hard to get the support of Gandhi for their colonial project, a man who was fighting against British colonialism in his own country. Okay, so yeah. Let's see. It says, yeah, so it was interesting because it says Theodor Herzl, who we all know who he is, like he's considered like the founder of Zionism. So he based the Jewish demand for Palestine on the Bible, but expressed his wish that the future Jewish state be run according to the European political and moral philosophies of his time. So, and it says he seriously considered alternatives to Palestine, such as Uganda, which we know as the promised land of Zion. He also looked at other destinations in the North and South of America and in Azerbaijan. So we know all of this. I mean, this has been something that we pro-Palestinians have been saying for a long time. Like the claim that, number one, you can't have a claim to a piece of land based on religion because not everyone abides by that religion. It's no different. It would be no different than a Muslim leader saying this land belongs to us because the Quran promised it to us. Well, the rest of the world doesn't follow the Quran, so should, the rest of the world just be like, oh yes, kick out whoever is living there because it belongs to you because your holy book says so. But even then, even if, let's suppose this Bible promised the Jews this land, which he actually argues that, there are people who argued against that. Like the Jews have interpreted the Bible in a way to say that it's promised to them, but it can also be interpreted in other ways, as he expressed in this chapter. He showed in this chapter that there are Jews that were like, no, the Bible does not promise us this land. And, he even said at one point that there's, he called it gymnastics. I can't remember, like religious gymnastics or something being done to, use the Bible in such a way that it will justify everything that they're doing. But no, you can't have your cake and eat it too. So if you're claiming that, the Bible promises you this land, then shouldn't you be living according to entirely Jewish principles then? But no, these people want to use the Bible, Zionists want to use the Bible to say that Jerusalem and Israel and Palestine belongs to them, but they want a secular state. At the time this book was written, or at the time that this was happening, maybe that was the case, as Herzl said, that he wanted it to be secular and based on the philosophies of so-and-so. But these days, I don't know whether that's true or not anymore. But this whole chapter just talked about how the Bible has been used by various groups throughout history to claim that this land belongs to them. But it's just a ridiculous notion, because you can't use a holy book to claim that you are the true inhabitants of a land when, you just can't force someone to accept your specific beliefs and then subjugate and torture and kill a whole people based on that belief. Like, it's just insanity. And I don't know how people just don't see that it's insanity. Like towards the end of this chapter, he says, Bible studies are now a crucial and expanded component of the curriculum in Israel, with a particular focus on the Bible as recording an ancient history that justifies the claim to the land. So, they're really propagating this idea that they are the promised people, that this land is the promised land to these people. They are the chosen people. Yet these chosen people commit all these atrocities in the name of God, like claiming that this land belongs to them. It's insanity. I feel like I did not do these two chapters justice in explaining why Zionism is not Judaism, but if you read this chapter, you will see that yes, Zionism is not Judaism, and a lot of Zionists today will try to convince you that it is. A lot of Zionists today will try to convince you that if you are anti-Zionist, you are anti-Semitic. That is not the case. Zionism is an ideology that was created in order for various reasons, as we saw. Like the Christians wanted the Jews to move there so that, the Messiah would come about. The Zionists, the Jewish Zionists who wanted Zionism to exist so that they could take over the land. But there were so many Jews who are against Zionism for very legitimate reasons, and they even use the same holy book to explain why actually they should not be there, and why their religion actually does not support Zionism. So no, Zionism is not Judaism. If you have Jewish people who are literally telling you that it is not anti-Semitic to be anti-Zionist, then you need to believe those people, because the ones who are in power and who are oppressing a whole people obviously, you know, are the ones who are trying desperately to convince the world of something which is not true. And it's the voices, the truthful voices, which are fewer, unfortunately, which get suppressed in times like this. But yeah. Anyway, I know I just did not do these 2 chapters justice, and I'm sorry. That was a really bad overview of these 2 chapters. Maybe I'll try again next week. But anyway, for next week, I know we were supposed to read chapter 4 for this week, so I'm going to read chapter 4. But let's just read the next 3 chapters, I think, which was what was planned earlier on. So read chapters 5, 6, and 7 for next week. And I'll try to do a better job myself. So, yeah. But again, I just want to say that if you've read the 100 Years' War in Palestine, a lot of what we see in this book is, was in this book as well, but it's just a more digestible book. It's more easier. It's just easier to read, easier to understand. But I highly, again, recommend looking at the timeline in the back and his bibliography to see the sources, the notes that he cites, because that will show you that, you know, the sources he's referring to are legitimate sources. And, you know, if you want to look up those sources, you definitely should as well. Yeah. I mean, he even referenced someone's diary from the early 1900s. I can't find it now, but I remember highlighting it. I can't find it now. But I might refer to this chapter again next week, just because I feel like I did not do it justice today. So for next week, please read chapters 5, 6, and 7, and I'll be reading chapter 4 as well. So yeah. So I just want to talk a little bit about the election. So let's move on. So just quickly, I want to have just a quick post-election discussion about Trump winning and Kamala losing. And I did have a couple of people comment on my video last week, 2 weeks ago, saying that I've been pronouncing Kamala's name wrong. So I'm trying to make an effort to pronounce it correctly. I still don't like her, but Kamala instead of Kamala. But I'm probably still going to mess up if I'm talking quickly, but I'll make an effort to pronounce it correctly. But, you know, post-election, us third-party voters have been getting blamed a lot for Kamala losing. And if you look at the numbers, we are not responsible for her losing. There are a lot of reasons why she lost, and it's not because of us. Even if all the third-party voters voted for her, she still would have lost. I believe it said that 16 million fewer people came out to vote for Kamala than did Biden in the previous elections. And why is that? It's because the Democratic Party just keeps on pandering to the right. Why would a Republican, it's a failing strategy to try to get Republicans to vote Democrat. Why would a Republican vote for a woman who is saying, oh yeah, I support fracking, I support your right to guns, and yeah, look, Cheney is endorsing me. Why would a Republican vote for her when he can just vote for a full-on Republican like Trump instead? It's just a completely failing strategy. It is absolutely stupid to try to win the votes of Republicans as a Democratic Party. But there's a whole lot of reasons why the Democratic Party lost, and you can do research into that, but it's not third-party voters. Even if we all voted for Kamala, she still would have lost. But that does not stop people from blaming us. So in fact, one of my best friends ended our friendship. We were friends for many, many, many years. And as she ended her friendship with me because I voted for Stein, and mind you, she's also living in New York, where it made no difference that I voted for Stein. But as she ended her friendship with me, she said to me, I hope you enjoy watching the West Bank get obliterated. Now, what an awful thing to say to someone. Number one, the West Bank had already been invaded by Israel prior to the elections. So the West Bank has already, Israel already started going into the West Bank and started its ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. Those who follow the news of the genocide already know this. We've seen this happening since before the genocide, before the election. Before the election began, we saw the genocide already creeping into the West Bank. So this whole claim that Trump is going to be worse for Palestinians, Sorry, but what's worse than genocide? Like, the worst has already happened. Gaza is already completely flattened. There's like literally nothing left. Like, there's nothing left in Gaza. The genocide continues every single day. Israel has invaded Lebanon. It's been killing countless people in Lebanon. Like, what is worse? Our current administration is 100% complicit in all of this. And to say that Trump is worse, like, no, there's nothing worse than the worst. We're already at the worst. You can't get worse than the worst, and there is nothing worse than genocide. So that argument just completely falls apart because it's completely stupid and nonsensical. But all these people who want someone to blame for Trump winning have been saying really awful things to anti-genocide protesters. So all these people who, we've seen a lot of this. You might not have seen a lot of this, but if you follow anti-genocide people on TikTok or Instagram, you would see a lot of this. So there's a lot of, unfortunately, Black Americans who are now openly being gleeful and saying, let's go to Starbucks, let's stop boycotting Starbucks because of the genocide. So a lot of us have been boycotting Starbucks for over a year, and it's made a difference. Like, so many Starbucks stores have had to close. They've lost a lot of profits. I mean, just check the news. You can see that the boycott has had a huge impact on Starbucks' sales. So boycotts do make a difference. But a lot of Black Americans, since Trump won, have been posting videos saying that they're now going to start going to Starbucks because they're angry. They're angry that Kamala lost, and they're blaming it on anti-genocide people who voted for Stein, which again is ridiculous because even if all our votes went to Kamala, she still would have lost. So completely ridiculous. So I just want to point out in this board game industry that all the people who were saying that we should vote for Kamala and because Trump would be worse, they are now completely silent. So in the last video, I showed you screenshots of Miklos from Our Family Plays Games talking about how worse Trump is going to be for Gaza. Has he since posted about Gaza? Has he said anything about Gaza since Kamala lost? No. Same with Trey Chambers, who kept on saying that, oh yeah, we just want to punish Democrats and that's why we're voting for Stein. Has he said anything about Gaza since Election Day? No, not that I can see at least. And what do we see on Facebook? So Eric Lang, who was encouraging people to vote for the lesser of two evils because he felt that that was a thing that should be done, and has since Trump won been going on and on about how we need to change the Democratic Party now and blah blah blah, like all the things that I was saying before. Now he's like, okay, yes, now we need to focus on changing the Democratic Party. Like, okay, good, better late than never, I guess. But I want to talk about something that he posted. So after the elections, he made this one post on Facebook. He said, on November 6th, he wrote, "When I was 12, I asked my grandfather what Germany was like in 1933. He said, and I remember clearly, I don't know, it was weird, quiet, and a lot of people on TV saying it either will be a new golden age or it won't be so bad." So you are invoking the Holocaust and what happened to say that now that Trump is elected, this is what's going to happen. This is, he's invoking the Holocaust to create fear now that Trump has been elected. Yet while there's an actual Holocaust happening, and he's never once used any words like that for the actual Holocaust, which is happening of the Palestinians. Like, there's like literally a genocide that's been going on for over a year, and he's never once invoked the Holocaust or previous genocides to talk about it. He's never once condemned the genocide, but now he's invoking the Holocaust and what happened in order to basically show that he's scared now that Trump is president. Like, this just infuriates me. Like, this just goes to show how little Arab and Muslim lives matter in this industry. And it's a known fact that bigotry against Arabs and Muslims is the last acceptable form of bigotry in the West. Like, it's true. Like, as a whole, bigotry against LGBTQ plus, not allowed. Bigotry against Black people, not allowed. Bigotry against East Asians, not allowed. Bigotry against anyone is basically not allowed unless it's against Arabs and Muslims. And people like Eric Lang continue to, post things which show that that's the case. Like, I mean, in the whole 1 year and 2 months now that the genocide has been going on for, he has not once posted, nearly 2 months, 1 year and 2 months, anything to say that, yeah, like, you know, what's happening in Palestine happened because, you know, people were silent during the Holocaust. He's not once invoked the Holocaust to talk about an actual genocide that's happening now, but now he's invoking the Holocaust to basically show that he's scared because now Trump is going to be president, and now things are going to get really bad. Things are already really fucking bad. I mean, hello, like there's a genocide happening, which our administration is fully complicit in. So it just makes me angry that someone would bring up the Holocaust when they've never once spoken about the genocide that's actually happening. They've never once condemned the genocide that is actually happening. Like, just really, really infuriating. And there was something else that was also posted in a comment somewhere, and I want to see if I can find it. I don't know if I'll be able to find the exact comment, but basically Eric Lang was basically saying something about how, I wish I could find the comment right now, but someone posted a comment about how, you know, people are kind of silent about what's happening in the industry with respect to the genocide. And he basically was trying to say that he does things quietly and behind the scenes. I cannot find that comment right now, but if I find it, I'll post it here. But I just want to say that for people like Eric Lang, who have been so vocal before that as an ally, you have to be loud and vocal, is he trying to now convince us that he's an ally of the Palestinians, but quietly behind the scenes? Because that is just such fucking bullshit. These people have been doing nothing but shouting for years and years that to be an ally, you have to be really loud and really vocal, because that's how change is made. Except for when it comes to Arabs and the Palestinians, apparently. When it comes to Arabs and the Palestinians, apparently you can be quiet and do it behind the scenes without showing anyone that you're an ally to the Palestinians or Arabs. Like, it's just complete utter bullshit, and it's just complete double standards. It's just complete hypocrisy. So, you know, the next time these people want everyone to be really loud and really vocal about some other group of people who is being persecuted or killed or whatever, no, just know that you can just be really quiet about it, because according to Eric Lang, it's okay to just be really quiet about it. Yeah. I mean, I'm just really over it. Like, these people are just complete hypocrites. They're just full of double standards when it comes to Arabs and Muslims and the Palestinians and the genocide, and it's just completely ridiculous. I don't know how they don't see what they are. Like, how can they actually take themselves seriously as champions of human rights and diversity, equity, and inclusion in this industry when they are completely silent about a genocide, completely silent about everything. And they're completely silent about the fact that it's Arabs and Muslims who are being targeted right now because Kamala lost. Like, I think I saw a post from him at some point about how Latinos and Black people are being targeted because Kamala lost. Like, nope, it's Arabs and Muslims who are mostly the targets of these liberals who are attacking them. It's liberals who are attacking, so-called liberals who are attacking Arabs and Muslims and blaming us for Kamala's loss. And that's mostly what I've seen. I haven't seen Black people get attacked for Kamala losing. Like, that doesn't make sense, because the majority of Black people actually voted for Kamala. So I don't know where he got that from. And Latinos, I don't know. I know that a large portion of Latinos did vote for Trump, but again, it's the Arab population and the Muslim population that is facing a lot of backlash right now for Trump winning. But is there any mention of that by him? No. You know, so I think we can clearly see his anti-Arab and his anti-Muslim bias. But they're never going to acknowledge it. So there's this one idiot on Twitter. His actual username is Pizza Meeple, and I just want to point out what he did, because these people always claim that they never attack anyone, they don't troll anyone on Twitter, and, you know, they're above it all. But no, these are the same people that consistently do attack and troll others and gatekeep and do all of the shit that they claim that they don't do and accuse others of doing. So after Kamala lost, this idiot, he with another username came onto my profile and was like, fuck you. He called me a moron and other things. And so I went onto his burner account and went through the replies on his burner account that he was using to attack me on Twitter. And I found a tweet that he had responded to of his own to call someone else an idiot within that conversation that was happening. So Pizza Meeple, this burner account, Corn Cob for a Cutie, went onto a post that Pizza Meeple made and called another person an idiot or something like that. I'll post the screenshot here. And then when I pointed out that Pizza Meeple was not doing a very good job of hiding his identity while coming onto my profile with a burner account to attack me, he then deleted that tweet that I have screenshotted here and have proof of, because I guess he needed to delete the proof that yes, in fact, this is Pizza Meeple who created a burner account to come and attack me. This is the same idiot who back when the genocide began said that I would keep on moving the goalposts for people in this industry when it comes to Palestine. Because back when the genocide first began and I was criticizing people in this industry for remaining silent, this idiot posted on his Twitter that, oh, no one I could never be happy with anything anyone does in this industry, and that I would keep on moving the goalposts for people's advocacy for Palestinians. And I believe I had posted at that time in response to his stupid tweet that the bar is set so low for these people. Like, for him to say that I would keep on moving the goalpost, they haven't even done the bare fucking minimum. Like, they have not even done the bare fucking minimum of condemning a genocide. Not once have these people even condemned the genocide, yet here they are. Here was this person saying that, oh, she's just gonna keep on moving the goalpost. She's just like, just trying to create drama. She's just, stupid like that. And all these people in the industry liked his tweet. Like, all these shitty people in the industry liked his tweet. All these people who claim to be about human rights and diversity liked his tweet criticizing me, saying that I would keep on moving the goalposts when it comes to Palestine. And have any of these people ever condemned the genocide? No. Have any of these people condemned Zionism, which is the Nazism today? No. They continue to support their Nazi publishers like Burnt Island Games and Kids Table Board Gaming. And in fact, Kids Table Board Gaming has a new game coming out on Kickstarter, which Our Family Plays Games, of course, promoted. And Our Family Plays Games continues to be sponsored by this Zionist publisher. So like, when he said that I would keep on moving the goalposts, like, these people haven't even met the fucking bare minimum of doing the very bare minimum of condemning the genocide. And here he was on my profile on Twitter calling me names and saying fuck you because I voted for Jill Stein. Like, clearly brainless, because yet again, as I already discussed, third-party voters are not the reason that Kamala lost. So yeah, just keep on crying about it. I don't fucking care. We're not the reason that Kamala lost, and you're just proving how fucking stupid you are if you're just going to keep on blaming us third-party voters. Yeah, so that is my rant about the elections. And so yeah, and just to be clear, I'm not happy that Trump won. I told you guys in the beginning, it's a lose-lose situation for us. Whether Kamala won or whether Trump won would have been a lose-lose situation for people like me. And it is a lose-lose situation. I don't like Trump and I'm not happy he won. Would I have been happy if Kamala won? No, I voted for Stein for a reason. But yeah, it's a lose-lose situation for people like me. But there's all these people who are calling me names and still attacking me, and I lost a lot of followers because I voted for Stein. So yeah, but it is what it is, as people say. And if people are going to be stupid and just lack basic logical skills and see that third-party voters are not the reason that Kamala lost, and they're not going to do their basic research into how badly the Democratic Party needs reform, then I can't help them. Like, that's on them, really. Anyway, so that is my rant. So let's move on. So this week's question of the week is, what is a house rule for a game that you always play with that you believe makes the game better? So please tell me the house rule below and the game below. So the house rule that we as a group, my game group, and I always play with now for Rebel Princess is that the princess powers, the loser, the person who's coming in last place, will get to decide a new princess power for the next round, and then you will go in reverse. So, you'll start with the biggest loser down to the winner, and you'll choose your princess power in reverse order, so that they can hopefully maybe kind of catch up. Like, it'll give them a chance to get a power that they might be able to use and help them out since they're losing so badly. And honestly, I think that makes the game so much better, because to have the same princess power throughout the entire game, when not all powers are equal and not all powers are very good and some might not even get used, just does not seem like a good rule to me. So the fact that we have a house rule that you can choose a new princess power based on your ranking in the scores, at the beginning of the next round, and we always reveal the new rule for the next round before people can choose their new princess power. I think it greatly improves the game, and that is a house rule I will continue to play Rebel Princess with going forward. So I want to know what games of yours you have house rules with that you always play with, and how does it improve the game. So please leave that in the comments below, and until next week, bye.